Ayo, it's your boy. Take three. I'm having real trouble with this. The fourth episode of The Code. Thanks for tuning in. I was walking on Burrard and I realized that I'm going to posit here that it wouldn't be entirely unuseful or incorrect to understand two types of cults emerging primitive cults uh, that usually arose from pre religious or a religious societies. The cult of death. I can't cite any of this. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's all. I think what I'm saying is has enough truth in it to be useful and interesting to think about at least. I'm not selling it very well, but keep watching. It's going to get really good. Uh, the Wokes are a death cult. David Mamet said that on Rogan, and I turned it off. I was like, all right, whatever, tough guy. And then I just couldn't stop thinking about that. Because a lot of the implicit attitude in wokeness is everything is bad, and the implicit implication, what is implied is that the nature of reality and consciousness and existence is fundamentally evil and some sort of manifestation of tyrannical oppression. If you def, and everything needs to be deconstructed, which is I'm starting to suspect a shorthand for destroyed. I was reading Beyond Good and Evil one morning, 4 a.m., after a binge at a friend's house, and Nietzsche was talking about something else, Nietzsche, but he said some people would prefer to rest on a certain nothing than an uncertain something. And it's understandable that this would be appealing because you can just resign yourself to misery. It's a form of protecting oneself, and I think it wouldn't be, perhaps it's not always useful, but it wouldn't be incorrect to call that cowardly, as opposed to, nurturing hope that existence and reality is fundamentally a good thing and should be propagated and spread and appreciated. So you see what I mean here? The wokes are kind of a death cult. It's kind of everything is bad, and anyone trying to defend existence, reality, or consciousness is simply trying to give you a false hope to manipulate you and oppress you. Unfortunately, I don't think that's true, but there's a strong and appealing enough case for that you kind of have to take it seriously. Maybe one day I'll refute that, but I'm just going to go on record and say I don't think that's true. And to get a little postmodern, if we have to pick lies on which to build consensus and civilization and a stable consciousness and cosmology, understanding of the universe, that's a terrible one to pick. That's a that will create more misery than picking the something like Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. That I think they do two things. Those maybe realer, more sophisticated, if you don't mind my chauvinism or perhaps my preference for later, more developed religions that have, you know, gone through a prehistory or maybe a myth-based cosmology past the stage of death cults and fertility cults and into more sophisticated religions. And by sophisticated, I mean they serve the infected better or the faithful because they give a rich framework for the indoctrinated to play inside while giving them a sort of comfort, a sort of there's an edge to the sandbox. The imagination can play in the sandbox, but the sandbox isn't infinite, and maybe the only threat is there might be some cat poop. Nothing totally crushing. And this sandbox, the imaginative and the creative, can add to the myth and doctrine of the religion or the culture that gives them the sandbox to play inside. It also, sophisticated and beneficial religions, let's not including but not limited to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism reassures people that there is value to human thriving. There's also redemptive value to suffering, and that there is such a thing as meaning, and that the suffering of their lives isn't meaningless, and that living good and ethical lives are worth the struggle. There's nothing worse than there's nothing more torturous than serving two masters, as Jesus would say. There's nothing worse than being divided between hope and despair. And I think all people of all times are kind of cut down the middle that way. But the greatest, the braver and more ethically meaningful decision is to pick hope. It sucks. It's kind of sucks, but I think that's true. It's a heavy burden. I'm going back to my Catholic roots here with this kind of heaviness that just makes you kind of want to die, but is ultimately hopeful. Um, and religions provide the reassurance that contributing to the kingdom of heaven, to making it real, is worth all the suffering of life, basically. So this is why I think we need a postmodern religion. We need a religion that knows it's a story, and but is a story so compelling and beautiful that it can inspire the engineers and scientists and artists of tomorrow to create it, because they need to do something. And you might as well contribute to the greatest degree of human flourishing and to make your religion real. If you don't direct your worship and your focus, the consequences are usually much worse. Um, and one of the cool things that I've been playing with the code is that to expand the universe, the volume of existence, to bring all existence into conscious life, to make all matter alive, and to contribute to the circumstances where all of that life is there. May be, I'm not sure how competitive fits into this, but fundamentally is collaborating on defeating threats to existence such as the heat death of the universe. And maybe this collaboration of all matter being alive could become so sophisticated that we create new dimensions. Imagine, bro. Imagine the infinity of dimensions is a superposition that only needs to be perceived for it to become real. Imagine that. Isn't that fucking sick? It's 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 a I'm a desperate loser trying to create a pyramid scheme to give me money and status, but from that degeneracy could come something so beautiful. It could be that me right here is only articulating something that is inevitable, and then I vastly overestimate my role. But this ideal that I've been playing with, this meme of memes, ideal of ideals, is worth making fun YouTube videos about. I'm having a blast. I hope you're having fun, and together we can build the code. Now, I just want to talk a little more about. So I think we're in a stage where we had a brief. It's a little microcosm of what played out in prehistory and the early origin of the earliest parts of history. Is a religious societies probably have a mythic framework. I heard somebody laugh at an anthropologist said, "Show me a religion, and 100 years or a couple hundred years prior, I will show you a cult." And I thought that was kind of disturbing to me as a Catholic of goodwill. Generally, I tried to pick hope and not despair, but I thought about it, and this is why this adds into my thinking that an attempt to live a-religiously or pre-religiously leads to primitive misery and chaos, which eventually gives way to the the religion-sized hole in people being filled by cults. And a death cult is kind of cool on Twitter. I just want to die. I'm so mentally ill. I get it. I've indulged in that fun. Maybe there's some catharsis in that humor. All that stuff. I'm pro free speech. Keep the books in the library. But it's not sophisticated worship. It's rejecting the weight of consciousness, which is a short game. It's a short little cul-de-sac that looks very interesting at first, I think. The second is the phenomenon of the modern simp, which I'll quickly loosely describe as someone either consciously deciding to or allowing themselves to become pathetic to pursue women. But I think you could perceptualize this or conceptualize this and perceptualize this. I've never said the word perceptualize. Uh, that this is an unsophisticated form of fertility worship. This is an attempt to both simultaneously build, serve, and acquire and dominate. I'm making myself hard here, but it's a fascinating Rubik's cube of contrary human urges. The male simp towards the female idealized and perhaps simultaneously objectified subject to objectification. But to allow simping is to prostrate oneself, to bow down towards the reality of reproduction. That's closer to picking life, I think, than the death cult. But it's pathetic. It's unsophisticated worship, at least. Simping, the OnlyFans phenomenon. So, death cults, fertility cults arising from a generation, let's say a generation of millennials that declare themselves above or post-religious. And it's not, I might be engaging, things might be much better than the internet would have us believe because it's cool to be miserable, kind of. But I think there is a degree of internal chaos going on right now. A degree. I don't know. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 70, maybe it's. But I do think that it's not entirely unuseful to see an a-religious generation reverting to the most primitive and least constructive types of cults, which is death cults and fertility cults, wokes and simps. So why I think that religious shaped hole, we might be able to eugenics it and CRISPR it out of our DNA. I'm not sure that'd be a good thing. Who knows what the future holds? But I think what we have to do is a postmodern religion is a story that is acknowledged that it is just a story, but that it's collaborated on so well that it becomes so beautiful that it just begs to be made real. The code is, of course, programming language, all forms of expression simultaneously. Programming language, musical notation, written art, classic cipher. Uh, the follower of genetic language. What if we the next step was we became aware and we began working on our own genetics consciously? That's cool. That's cool. Something aliens might be able to do. Um, so I'm asking you to help me make the code a reality. I'm once again asking you to help me make the code a reality. The code is a architecture. Um, Full disclosure, just to add a little addendum, I looked at my notes and I saw another thing. I think, roughly speaking, if you put a gun to my head and you said, are religions true or untrue? Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Baha'ism, Hinduism. I'm probably forgetting some isms. I don't know that much about Confucianism. Is it true? I think roughly they're true. But defending that could just be a fiction that helps me get through my day, and it's beyond my ability, my understanding of the world and my energy. So I focus my will to power, all of the wills that I have, my desire for beauty, status, and I try and have the most enlightened self-interest possible, and I try and synthesize them into attempts to propagate, let's make the code.